Welcome to Courtney on Health, heard on MalcolmPresents.com, a streaming, well, it's not new, but a streaming service that's heard around the world and other planets. Anyway,
Jupiter and Mars. Right.
Anyway,
So,
Maxine, do your intro.
I'll take it away. Take it away.
Take it away.
So, taking it away. Take it away. Take it away. It's a good song. Anyway, if you're a Chili Pepper fan. So hi Courtney and hi Malcolm.
Hello.
hello. Welcome to Courtney on Health, a Zoomcast podcast series which focuses on one's overall well-being with tips on nutrition and exercise given by Courtney Grevenese, registered dietitian with a Master of Science degree in nutrition and applied physiology. I always love that word, physiology. Courtney is an experienced nutritional and health consultant in the New York metro area and beyond, as Malcolm says, into the universe, and will guide you on a path to wellness and health. That's the whole idea of this podcast and this Zoomcast. So, according to the makers of Maxwell House Coffee, your morning cup of Joe is good to the last drop. That was the commercial for them. I always seem to go into commercials somehow, the things to open up Courtney's stuff. But the question is it good for you? Most people, it is not harmful to consume up to 400 milligrams of caffeine a day. We'll have to check that with Courtney. But can affect, but according to Medline Plus, if you do eat or drink too much caffeine, you can eat it and things, it can affect your body as it can cause restlessness, shakiness, insomnia, some other things. On the other hand, there can be the heart healthy benefits in your morning brew. A large study published in the Journal of American College of Cardiology, it was suggested that the benefits of coffee could benefit you overall, your overall cardiovascular system. Magnetic resonance imaging results for more than 300,000 study participants, not 300, 30,000 study participants showed that daily coffee drinkers had healthier sized and better functioning hearts than those who didn't drink coffee regularly. Though experts say that more research is needed to fully understand the connection. So it's not totally there, but it's a pretty good study. So I'll let Courtney, because she has some great information, talk about the pros and cons on how the kick from caffeine, not the kick from champagne in this case, but the kick from, I keep thinking I get my kicks from champagne, but people get their kicks from caffeine. And how does that affect your body and your soul? You know, everyone has different feelings about coffee and it has to wake you up. I've been having a lot of tea lately and that has caffeine too. There's a lot of things.
Yeah, we're gonna go through all of that. And certainly if you are not a coffee drinker, but more of a tea drinker, that is absolutely fine. But we're going to go through where maybe some of the hidden caffeine is in a lot of different beverages. But absolutely, what we know about the benefits and then the risks of too much caffeine, there's a lot of research, a lot of data that's out there for us to look at. So I feel like some people get a little crazy about, I don't want to have any caffeine, I don't want to drink coffee, and that's absolutely fine if the flavor doesn't do it for you, or if you're having a side effect from it that is not what you're looking for. So you mentioned, Maxine, that too much in some people, and for some individuals that's could be a very small amount. Caffeine can certainly give you the jitters. Absolutely, the hang time of caffeine in the bloodstream is much greater than a lot of folks realize. So it may be the culprit for issues with sleep that some folks may be experiencing. So these folks might need to either make their last cup of coffee much earlier in the day, or consider, scaling back entirely. So the jitters, in very high rate of blood pressure or in heart rate, it's a stimulant, remember, which is why I'm sort of digressing here. It was historically put in a lot of diet, quote unquote, diet pills that have, thankfully, most of them have been pulled from the market, but not all. Because it's a stimulant, it causes your heart to race, makes you feel a little hopped up. And because of that, it wasn't anything mysterious about it. It was just making you eat less because you had the jitters. So,
Right.
so for some people, that's not a great feeling to have. So they don't necessarily have any kind of caffeinated beverage, but in particular coffee, given the amount of caffeine that's in it. But we also know great benefits of caffeine. So in terms of it being potentially helpful for, perhaps preventing type 2 diabetes, we know in terms of its effect on energy level, on mood, on memory. It has been long used in, and we're going to sort of loop back to, athletics, long used as to help with athletic performance. So we'll talk about, we're NCAA seas, right? We got a
Oh
game.
yeah, I got UConn, baby. UConn.
I gotta
Malcolm is
talk about it. We got the men's final final game tonight, so I'm super excited about that. But both the IOC, which stands for the International Olympic Committee, and the NCAA have guidelines on banned substances. So since we know that caffeine is helpful in boosting athletic performance, it is permitted for use in athletes, but only to a certain amount. And let's talk about NCAA's amount for a second right now.
How do they know? How do they figure that amount? That's interesting.
How do they figure the amount?
I mean, if they're having a cup of coffee, an athlete's having a cup of coffee at probably their favorite place, Starbucks. I mean, if you're ordering a regular cup, what's in there? You could be ordering cappuccino with espresso, which has
of course
a shot. How do they figure that out? Is my question.
Right. It's done through, as much of the drug testing is done, because it is considered a drug, it's done through urine analysis. So they're actually looking at pre-game, pre-competition, in the Olympics, they're tested very frequently. So caffeine is a little weird one. Like if you talk to a bunch of different coaches and athletes, it's approved for use, but because of its edge, you can see why some individuals might say, well, you're saying okay to caffeine, but there are so many other things that are banned that have maybe less of an effect. But nonetheless, we're not going to change those rules. So for NCAA, the test limit is 15 micrograms per milliliter of urine. For athletes in the Olympics, that level is a little bit lower. It's at 12 micrograms per milliliter of urine. So they're tested for it because they want to make sure, like to your point, Maxine, it's everywhere. What's going to stop an athlete from going out and having 4 cups of high test coffee? It will certainly give them an advantage if they're able to A, tolerate it, and B, not have any GI discomfort from it. So there are limits set. So this was sort of a long way of saying this is one of the benefits, well-known benefits of caffeine. So you can see why it can be used for a variety of reasons. Yeah. I know me personally, I'm a 1 cup in the morning. It is high test, very much high test. Right. And it's, it's a big mug like this. So it's certainly more than
I have a.
You have one too, Max. Look at you.
It says me and you.
I don't have any cute writing on my mug though.
You and me, it says. Yeah, I tend to go with a big cup of either coffee or multiple cups, at least 2.5 cups of tea.
Well, I don't drink.
I don't know what the difference.
I don't drink coffee anymore. I don't drink coffee anymore because it supposedly stimulates the bladder. And my bladder doesn't need stimulation.
Well, it's a coffee hag is a coffee hag is a coffee hag.
No, I didn't wake up before I had my 2 cups of coffee, but I've changed that. A question for you. I don't know if it's still relevant. Pepsi and Coke generally contain caffeine.
Sure.
Do they still?
They sure do, unless they specifically say caffeine free. So let's talk about that. That's a nice segue into caffeine where you might find caffeine, aside from obvious sources like a cup of regular coffee, right? And even within that category, there's different levels, and we'll talk about that. So I know this seems obvious, but as we're moving into warmer weather, iced tea So unless it is specifically labeled as such, or wherever you get your iced teas from, or making it at home, iced tea starts with regular black tea. Again, unless you're making it at home and you know it's an herb tea and not a leaf tea. Just because it's iced, there's still going to be caffeine in it. Now, we mentioned when we started that, caffeine can really stay in the bloodstream and therefore, affect your sleep for many, many hours. So whereas, many people might cut off their coffee intake at maybe 12, 1 o'clock, and I actually think that's a good idea. Lots of people during the summer will sip iced tea all day long, into the evening hours. Now, for some folks, that's not a problem. They're not affected by that caffeine. But for others, certainly keep on the lookout, because just because it's iced and diluted doesn't necessarily mean that caffeine goes away. So iced tea for sure. Breakfast cereals, which is an odd one. I know some people might not necessarily think that. It's typically
breakfast cereal. Wow.
Particularly the chocolate flavored cereals. So that would make sense because we'll jump right into it. Not only dark chocolate, but regular chocolate has caffeine in it as well. Dark chocolate can have up to about 23 milligrams of caffeine in it. Think about a half of sort of a Hershey bar size in terms of a visual, but regular chocolate can have it as well. So I often, if I'm working with parents and kiddos who are having sleep issues and it's wintertime and they're having cups of hot cocoa throughout the afternoon, keep in mind that even if it's, instant hot cocoa, probably not that much. But if you're making it from scratch and using cocoa powder, absolutely, that could have more caffeine than you're bargaining for. Energy bars.
You're talking about milligrams, and I do not have any concept of what a milligram is. But let's say in an average cup of coffee, how many milligrams of caffeine do they have?
Well, we're going to talk about that, but in your average cup of coffee, again, depending on how you brew it, right? So if you brew it strong, it can have upwards of 150 milligrams to up to 200 milligrams, depending on, again, just how strong, the kind of roast that you're using, and just how strong you brew it. So those are two variables to take into consideration. So on the low end, a cup of coffee might have, again, this is regular coffee, not decaf coffee, can have maybe 100 milligrams. So hopefully that gives you an idea when you're comparing something like dark chocolate. It certainly is not the same as a cup of coffee, but it's not nothing. So if you're having palpitations, if you're having issues with sleep, issues with blood pressure, the jitters, you got to identify all sources. And certainly chocolate can be one of those. Energy bars, granola bars. Look at those labels carefully. A lot of times, particularly if they're labeled as an energy bar, and some of that energy is coming from certainly protein, fat, carbohydrate, but the other, in quotes, energy is coming from the kick you get from the caffeine. So if a product contains caffeine, it must be listed, and it has to be listed in the ingredient list. And there are a handful of bars that I have seen that do contain caffeine. So you want to make sure if it's in there, you know about it, and that it's something that you actually want to have.
I always look at I get loose tea. I like to make loose teas. And I loose tea, I have black teas, green teas, then there's herbal with no caffeine. But each tin has the amount that they, for, say per cup, for, a couple of tablespoons and equals a cup. And that's, and they put it at like 40 to 60 and some 40 to 80 milligrams per cup based on the tea. And so I try to look at that. Coffee, I don't look at as much, but I'm assuming if I'm making it's different if you're making drip or you have a filter, or if you have a press, right? The coffee amounts are different in the milligrams.
Right. So, without being the total science geek, a lot of the strength of the coffee and then therefore the caffeine content of the coffee is going to come down to, you're right, what kind of roast are we talking about? How it's being prepped. So is it a French press? Is it a drip? So think about the surface area of your grinds as well. So is it very, very powdery, like almost an espresso powder, therefore greater surface area? So you're going to pull more, right, out of the grinds that are in there, or is it a more coarser, a more coarse grind? So those are things to take into consideration. I mean, most coffee drinkers, I mean, I know if you're a coffee drinker out there and you're listening, you know this. You will know if you get a blonde roast or if you get, you know, an Italian or a French roast. There's no question. You pretty much taste the difference there. But thank you for bringing this up, Maxine, because I want to just talk very quickly about, I know we spoke about this when we did our coffee tea segment a while ago, the compound caffeine, which is in coffee, which has benefits to it. It's actually one of the reasons why they think coffee might be helpful for preventing type 2 diabetes and all the other, and as an anti-inflammatory compound. So small amounts, great. Large amounts, not so much. They actually may raise cholesterol levels. So we know that French press coffee, so if you guys are not familiar with that, if you're listening to me, those are the ones that, you know, you don't have a coffee maker, you don't have something on your stove, it's not perk, it's literally hot water press, you know, put into a cylinder, a glass cylinder, and there's almost like a heavy sieve that's being pushed through, and it separates out the grinds, and what you're left with on top is the coffee. And data has shown that, in particular, French press coffee has greater amounts, much greater amounts of that caffeine, which may put, you know, if you're drinking large amounts of that, it might be problematic with regard to increasing cholesterol levels.
Yeah, that's crazy because I have a French press, but I don't drink anywhere near as much coffee as tea. So I think I'm okay, but I love the French press. I was thinking of the Chemex to get, because now it has a filter on the top. You can put the filter in, and so that might be my next go-to after listening to you today. So
yeah, so you know, it's funny, I'm asked this question a lot from folks. Like I said, I drink, you know, French roast. It's a dark blend, and at holiday time, my family grew up with espresso. It's sometimes for folks it's a little bit too strong, but so the amount of caffeine in espresso, that, well, if I'm having a cup of espresso, is that going to be more caffeine for me? Am I better off with a cup of coffee? And the answer is probably not so much. When you think about it this way, the amount of caffeine in coffee, and let's just say an average blend, right, is going to be between 12 and 16 milligrams per ounce. But you don't normally have 1 ounce of coffee. Compare that to espresso, which does have 63 milligrams per ounce, but you do only have typically a shot of an espresso, and that shot is typically about 1 ounce. So it's not so black and white. So you can, if all you're having is an espresso in the morning, well, that's under 100 milligrams. Quite frankly, that's actually less caffeine than you might be getting in a big mug like this of a French roast.
Yeah.
So
people ask for 2 and 3 shots of
espresso.
espresso.
I always had espresso. The only time I ever actually take espresso is like after a full meal. And for some reason, I feel the espresso cuts all the grease. You know, like when you have a full meal, you feel, you know, bloated.
Rotor, Malcolm?
Yeah, the espresso sort of like cuts it.
I don't know. I never thought about that. Well, back in Brooklyn, they said after a good, you know, Chinese Asian meal in Brooklyn, because, you know, that was a thing. And you had to have vanilla or pistachio ice cream because that cut through all the Chinese food. It was like, no, it tastes good. Oh, you think we stupid? You know,
oh, that's funny.
It was
funny.
But
yes, Max,
anywho,
to your point, Max, even if you are having 3 espressos, and I'm not suggesting people have 3 espressos. If you're doing the math on the caffeine, again, if that's your preference, you still would be under 200 milligrams, which, to your point when you did your intro, generally, unless you've been told specifically by your healthcare provider not to have 300 to 400 milligrams of caffeine from any sources a day, generally, most of us are going to be fine with that level of caffeine. Again, being mindful of what time of the day you're having it. You may want to front load it so it's not interfering with your sleep. The one category of folks who should not be having that much caffeine are pregnant women or women trying to get pregnant. So the new guidelines from the Academy, it's, gynecologists and obstetrics recommends that women who are pregnant or considering getting pregnant limit it to no more than 200 milligrams a day.
And also breastfeeding after you have your baby, because you can pass some of that caffeine on to the little bambino.
Right.
So
right. Which of course I always struggle when I'm working with like a new mom, because, she's like, you got to be kidding
exhausted,
me. Like,
right.
Kiddo's keeping me up all night.
Right,
and now you're telling me I can't. So I work with you.
right. Courtney will get you in a balanced spot. So just a quick question. How about these energy drinks, these drinks that now, even to the point where they're mixing vodka with, the kids in, the 20 somethings, they think it's a thing to have these energy drinks with, whatever. It's
Right.
First, just energy drinks. Are they the pros and cons of that? And then like alcohol in those things? I don't know.
Absolutely, because if you can think about, typically they're not just having one cocktail. No judgments here, right? But typically
right,
college
no
students
judgment,
are not known for their moderation. It's
Nope.
Full blown. So it's that combination of alcohol along with something that is absolutely increasing your heart rate and your blood pressure, and alcohol of course does that as well. So not a great combination. So what I would encourage, if you're a student listening, be mindful of that caffeine in these products, the 5-hour energy shots of the world. I get it if you're not a coffee drinker and that's your only option, just try to minimize how much you're having, and please really try to avoid mixing alcohol with it. But if you are a coffee or a tea drinker, I would much rather you get your boost to help you through your day and your studies with things that have been around for a long time, for thousands of years, teas and coffees. And just ingesting them that way. I want you to also look for something on the label, because sometimes it says caffeine free, and that's sort of a marketer's trick of getting you to buy their product. If it has a boost to it, meaning that it's going to give you a bolt of energy, you want to look for something called guarana, Guarana, and that has the same stimulatory effects, or very similar, as caffeine intake. So a lot of time they're using that ingredient either in conjunction with caffeine or to replace caffeine as their way around. And then, caffeine free, it's like, oh, it's fine. There's no caffeine in it. It still works. Not so fast. It has the same effects that caffeine would on your central nervous system.
Right. I mean, these energy drinks seem to be a college staple from what
Yeah.
Still currently, even back in the day when, the infamous Red Bull, and I'm not saying anything negative about any products or giving them a boost, but I remember seeing cans of that stuff all over the place, all the dorm rooms. So you gotta speak to your kiddos about that, your college kiddos especially, because and then mixing that with alcohol is not a good idea.
Yeah, it's a bad combination. And so on the flip side of that, if you've got, if you are somebody who's you're having trouble sleeping, you're a little anxious, you're a little jittery, there are all sorts of teas. And let's talk about the caffeine content of tea before I run out of time. So your black tea is going to have your greatest concentration. And again, depending how much, how long you brew it, and things like that, somewhere between 30 to 60 milligrams per cup per serving. Green tea is going to have a little bit less. So I do want to draw your attention to that, because a lot of people think that green tea, maybe because of the color, I'm not sure, they associate that with being an herb tea, and it is not. It is from the same, plant. It's just depending on how long it's fermented. It's wonderful. It's full of antioxidants. I'm not discouraging, but again, it's not caffeine free. And if that's important to you, you should know it can have upwards of 50 milligrams per serving. Decaf teas versus caffeine free. By labeling laws, caffeine free means 0. So that would be your herb, that would be your typical herb teas. So think this is chamomile, but there's a whole host of them, peppermint teas, things like that. So they're wonderfully calming, and they never had caffeine in them to begin with, as opposed to decaf tea, which means it's been in there and there's been some kind of processing done to it in order to remove that caffeine. One of the most common ways is through a water process, a Swiss water process, which is preferred because there isn't a chemical used in that in the removal of the caffeine. But folks should know that even if it's not Swiss water processed, the compound that is used to sort of cleave off that caffeine, at least according to the FDA, is generally regarded as safe. But so there's a process in order to remove that caffeine from the product.
Right. Now, caffeine, I mean, I was reading a little bit of stuff before, there are studies that said it's good for cardiovascular, even though you mentioned high blood pressure is and fast heartbeat because of the, so it's like it's a balance there. And what's also my question is, if you're drinking caffeine, you're the registered, dietitian here. What about withdrawal of that? People get headaches. People have all sorts of stories about getting, headaches. And then some people with migraines drink coffee and it feels, it's just crazy to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, let's dive into this. First of all, with regard to people who have migraines, and by the way, one of the other things I would encourage you to look for if you're very sensitive to caffeine is over-the-counter medications, which very often, like Excedrin, but there are others, purposely have caffeine added in them. It's usually with aspirin and acetaminophen combination to actually help with headaches. And it's a vasodilator, vessel dilation, opening. So it actually helps with things like headaches. So some people seek that out, but it's important to know what you're choosing. And with regard to the elevated high blood pressure, not everybody has an increase in blood pressure or adverse health effects from drinking coffee. Oftentimes what we're seeing is if there's an excessive intake. So somebody who's drinking coffee all day long is typically where we might see some of these undesirable health effects, like an increase in heart rate or blood pressure. But again, that 400 milligram amount or up to that, would probably be fine for many of us. So
an interesting effect on me, like in the evening when I was drinking coffee, if I would drink a hot cup of coffee, it would make me sleepy. For some reason, the warmth of it in my body made me sleep. It never kept me awake.
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean,
I know people like that. I can't even imagine doing that.
With a bunch, I grew up with, I always have an Italian-American family, and there was never a meal that did not wrap up with espresso. Right. So, and most of my relatives slept like babies. So not everybody is affected by it, but the reason why I bring it up is many people might be. So it's that might means do a little investigating into potential sources of those caffeines, particularly those hidden sources, like we mentioned, the energy bars and the drinks, ice cream, particularly chocolate, and obviously coffee flavored ice cream can have a lot. Some people have ice cream for dessert in the evening. Of course, it's totally fine, but there may be more caffeine in that than you might think.
Right. And then of course chocolate, and the dark chocolates especially, right? They have higher and higher amounts of it now. And they say it's good for you. It's good for your health. It's one of the things that they have on the list. It's okay to be eating that. But again, you can't eat all. First of all, I don't know how you would even, I just have a taste of it and it's kind of enough. I can't, people eating a whole bar of that in one sitting, I can't even imagine, especially the 70% cacao, whatever. I was like, how you eat a whole bar of that? No,
it reminds me of the old axiom, if it's good, it's either immoral, illegal, or fattening.
Okay. Well, I don't think any of this is immoral, illegal, or it depends on how much you eat of it.
Well, no, when she went over the ice cream.
Right. But coffee and tea have really no calories without any.
That's right.
By in and of themselves. If you drink coffee black or you have your tea dark without anything, because of my British part of my family. You're the Italian American. I have the Brits in my family. My grandmother was from England, and Liverpool, as a matter of fact. And I always think I'm related to the Beatles. But so I always put a little milk in a teaspoon of sugar because I'm just used
Which
to
is
drinking
absolutely fine. I mean, at that
British
level,
style. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's totally fine. I mean, obviously
Anyway,
you have
guys,
to.
I hate to be the Grinch, but time is up.
You're the Grinch.
Oh, all right, Malcolm.
Time is
Oh,
up. I'm
Malcolm.
sorry.
We want to play some more. Come on. But anyway, anyhow, so there's lots to discuss. Courtney will have more information up online.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us for Courtney on Health. To get more info, follow Courtney on her Facebook page, which is Courtney on Health, on Instagram and TikTok, which is at CLG Wellness. Visit her website, CourtneyGravities.com. She'll answer questions if you send them to her. For past shows, go to MalcolmPresents.com and TheManyShadesOfGreen.com. This has been Courtney on Health, Smart Sound Nutrition, Strong Safe Fitness, and we will catch you again next time.
See you next time.
And as I put the word in, and we're streamed on MalcolmPresents.com and YouTube and Twitter.
Ooh.
Yeah. I tweeted. I don't know if anybody listens to it on Twitter. I don't use Twitter myself, but you can't be tweeted.
Okay. Well, I won't even go into that. But anyway,
see you guys next week.
Take
Bye,
care.
By the way, have a good Passover.
Oh, happy holidays. Happy.
Oh, that's right.
Happy Easter. Happy Passover. Happy whatever religion is falling into this week of holiday of
religious weekend. I'll see you guys next week.
Take care.